Cheryl, we're about to start. We'll let you know when we're live.
Okay, well, just before we start, Jane.
Councillor Cheryl, we are now live.
Okay, lovely. Well, good morning, everyone. Bore da. My name is Councillor Cheryl Carlisle, and I'm the Chair of the Finance and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can I welcome everyone to the meeting, which is a multi-location meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live stream fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available? If you want to make use of this facility, please select the English language option on the microphone delegate unit if you're in the Council chamber, and for those attending remotely by clicking on the audio settings tab and selecting English. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please indicate by raising your hand and turn on your microphone when it's your turn to speak. In order for those online to be able to hear the translation at all times, for those remote attendees wishing to speak, please use the yellow hand function. When I call your name to speak, please press the push to speak button. If you have a point of order, just press the push to speak button. Committee members will be allowed to have their say first, and the relevant cabinet members will be brought in as and when appropriate, with non-committee members then being given the opportunity to speak. In order to maintain your place in the speaker queue, when asking a question, please leave your microphone on until you've received a response and asked any supplementary questions. It would be helpful if members could ask all their questions in one go. Whilst I do not wish to stifle debate, can I remind members that any questions should be focused on the subject matter and to avoid repetition. For those attending remotely, please note that those in the chamber will be unable to use the chat facility. Remote attendees, if you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, please pop a message in the chat function. I expect everyone present and participating in this meeting to conduct themselves appropriately and be respectful to each other. That applies to members, officers, and members of the public or press attending. Thank you. And just to explain, I'm currently chairing this remotely for the first time in my Frost history. As you know, I always make it to the chamber, but in my role as a carer, a meeting has come up this morning that a member of my family's been waiting for some 18 months. So I've had to seize the opportunity for that. So at some point during this morning's meeting, I'll be handing over to my Vice Chair, Councillor Chris Hughes in the chamber, and he'll be continuing with the meeting. So please bear with me because it's not as easy to chair remotely, as I'm sure most of you know. Okay, we'll move on to item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Sally?
Apologies have been received from Councillors Andrew Ward and Councillor John Roberts, also Rhian ap Gareth, the Chief Executive.
Lovely, thank you. And anybody from the floor, any other? No? Okay. We now move on to item 2, declarations of interest, Code of Local Government Conduct. If anyone could declare any interests?
No, nothing.
Nothing. Okay, that's great. Thank you, members. Item 3, urgent matters. There are none. Item 4, the minutes on pages 4 to 8, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 6th of July. Please, could I have a proposer and a seconder to approve these minutes? And it's a show by hands.
Councillor Charlie's proposing.
Lovely.
Councillor Goronwy seconding.
Excellent. If everyone could show in favour, please. Thank you very much. Diolch. And anyone against? No, those are carried. Thank you, members. We move on to item 5, minutes of the informal meeting of Overview and Scrutiny Committee chairs and vice chairs, pages 9 to 15. This meeting was held on the 16th of July. If I could have a proposer and a seconder, please.
Councillor Charlie McCoubry proposing.
Lovely.
And Councillor Chris seconding.
Lovely, thank you very much. And if members could show in favour, please. Everybody. Lovely. Anyone against? Nope, that's carried. Thank you, everybody. We now move on to the minutes of the Governance and Audit Committee. This meeting was held on the 29th of June and it's pages 16 to 22. We could have a proposer and a seconder, please.
Councillor Gareth Jones proposing, and Councillor Chris Hughes seconding.
Lovely. Thank you very much. If members could show in favour. Thank you. And anyone against? No, those are carried. Diolch, members. Item 7, questions to Cabinet members. We have none. I'm sure it's their great relief. We now move on to item 8 to review the forward work programme, and Jane Jones, our Scrutiny Lead Officer, is going to provide any updates. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Good morning, members. I'd just like to report on 2 updates for you. At the next meeting, you'll receive the staff survey results for 2025, together with a draft action plan. And in October, you will receive the annual scrutiny report. That's my update at the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Jane. Councillor Abdul, you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, can you hear me, Chair?
Oh, very crackly, Councillor Abdul, but give it a go.
Okay, I'm just, I think it's on the next item, page 55, regarding the Colne Bay Town Centre Regeneration Programme. We don't seem to have any date, and Andrew Wilkinson is here. It's been a few years now, so we just, if he can update us on that, or at least give us a date on it.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Abdul. Who's going to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's Councillor Mike. Andrew Wilkinson's on leave, so I'll get a date circulated to members.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Mike, for that. And we'll circulate that to all members, Councillor Abdul. Thank you. And Councillor Anne.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of things, Jane, queries on. I don't see anything in the plan about an asset management progress report due in January 2027, which I think we agreed this January. So if that could just be included, would be great. Also, I don't see any reference to a maximising income generation progress update. Again, I think that was agreed that we would have that from the budget decisions that we made. And I think that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Anne.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. I'll look into those matters for you and report back. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jane. And we will circulate that to all members as soon as we've got the up-to-date information and dates. Anybody else? No more questions? Okay, lovely. Well, in that case, could we have a proposer and a seconder to approve the forward work programme, please?
Councillor Nia proposing, Councillor Gronwe seconding.
Yeah. If we could show, please, members, all in favour? Thank you. And anyone against? No. Okay, those are carried. Thank you very much, Jane, for that. We now move on to item 9 to consider reports by the Strategic Director, Finance and Resources on the following matters. And we start with the financial outturn 25-2026, which is on pages 60 to 72 of your pack. Councillor Chris Cater, Cabinet Member for Finance and Strategic Planning, is going to introduce the report, and Amanda Hughes, Strategic Director, Finance and Resources, is going to present. So over to you, Chris and Amanda.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd, bore da pawb. Yes, so this report compares the actual 25-26 financial outturn with both the original budget estimate and the Q3 forecast, which was standing at an overspend of 1.582 million when the figures last came to the committee chair, and these went to Cabinet as well. The Council has encouragingly now achieved a final surplus of 48,000, and this reflects a combination of service improvements, favourable corporate budget outturns, and several one-off funding and income items. I welcome the increase in council reserves, which have increased to 17.782 million and are now consistent with the 5% minimum level set out in our own reserves policy. I think considering the national and international financial uncertainties that are affecting local authorities and of course our own specific service pressures, it is also important to report that the majority of the planned service savings have been achieved. I'd have to say I commend the strong focus and effort that all our teams have put into this achievement. Underlying demand pressures remain though, and moving forwards, our concentration on priority services and meaningful transformation will continue to be crucial. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. And we'll hand over to Amanda now to present her report. Diolch, Amanda.
Thank you very much, Cadw. Bore da pawb. So this essentially concludes the 25-26 financial year. So it obviously commenced when members set the balanced budget back in March 20 or end of February or beginning of March, can't quite remember, 2025, and you've received regular monitoring reports throughout the year about that position. So reflecting from that third quarter position to the final, as Councillor Chris has already outlined, it was positive that what a forecast overspend at quarter three of 1.5 million has in fact essentially come back to a break-even position, and that's obviously very positive. And I obviously once again thank my colleagues and budget holders for making sure and working to budget as best they can, and we have equally benefited from some windfall income as well as other income throughout the year. But just before I go into sort of some of that detail, just to confirm and clarify the overall position in terms of how we draw our accounts together. So as well as obviously reporting to you from a management accounting point of view, we obviously have to prepare a statement of accounts which is subject to external audit in accordance with legislation, and we have done that and submitted the draft financial statements to Audit Wales by the 30th of June, which was the deadline set by Welsh Government. Considerable effort has to go into the preparing of the accounts alongside continuing day-to-day activity, and it's credit to the finance team and particularly actually the estates team. The valuers are heavily involved in the preparation of the accounts to get those deadlines met. So the audit is currently underway, and that will continue through the summer with a view that the accounts will hopefully be signed off by the end of September, again the statutory deadline. The accounts have been prepared in accordance with the local government accounting code of practice, and within that I've as the Chief Financial Officer obviously made appropriate accounting entries for various things, including the use of reserves, etc. And I'll talk a little bit about some of that. But you know, from a management accounting point of view, obviously, as I say, the positive news is that we were able by the end of the year to essentially break even in terms of our revenue activity, which is positive, and obviously meant that we didn't have to utilize our reserves to balance the budget position. I've set out in Table 1 the key movements between the third quarter position and the final outturn position, and essentially that reflects some improvements in forecast budgets across certain services, and also other changes and some windfall income that we had in relation to some activities. So that sets out some of the detail, and obviously happy to discuss any of that if you want to. I think it's also worth noting as well, members obviously are very keen to understand the position across the school sector, and again, credit to all of our schools that they demonstrated financial resilience, continued to demonstrate financial resilience during the year, and actually in managing their financial position, they were able to not draw on reserves as had been anticipated earlier in the year. I think I'd been reporting earlier in the year in the budget processes set by schools, there'd been an anticipated use of over 3 million of their reserves. In actual fact, as an overall cohort, that wasn't used, and in fact reserves have increased by 76,000 across the school cohort, recognising obviously though that the individual position of individual schools will differ, but that's the global overall position. However, when we're talking about schools, we also need to recognise and we know that a number of our schools have loan arrangements agreed with us, so and essentially an internal loan agreement where we're supporting the school to get back to a balanced budget position over a number of years. And at the end of the year, the school loans, whilst the school balances stood at 4.458 million, the school loans offset that and stood at 1.554 million. And in actual fact, following the year end, a further £752,000 of loans were also agreed and supported through appropriate mechanisms. And therefore it's fair to say, obviously, that schools continue to face significant pressure. You'll also be aware that we have recently undertaken work with SIPFA, and that's led to a detailed action plan in terms of planned work on the back of that. And one of those pieces of work which is currently underway is that we are reviewing and looking at the individual school budget funding formula, which we feel is subject, is timely in terms of needing to review to ensure that the resources that we are using to support schools are being distributed as best they can across that school cohort to support all schools in a fair and transparent way. Obviously, though, any outcome of that formula review doesn't address to the extent that there might be any underlying inherent funding shortfall. And I'm not saying there is, that I believe there is, or that I believe there isn't. I think that's something that we need to assess. But just to clarify, the formula review in and of itself doesn't address that underlying issue, if in fact there is one. As Councillor Chris outlined, it's positive that the savings that were put forward in the budget were largely achieved. To the extent of those that weren't achieved, we're confident that in time they will be achieved. It was merely, I guess, the pace of achievement was a bit slower than had been anticipated, and that's why there was the in-year shortfall, but confident of the future. But in overall terms, again, positive and a credit to services that the savings that they put forward were largely achieved, and that's, in the current financial climate, I think that's noteworthy. Moving on then to our reserve position, I've appended in Appendix 3 the detailed reserves. I've focused specifically in relation to our revenue reserves, but you'll also see at the very bottom of Appendix 3, which is on page 72, that I have also set out the capital reserves in total. So of our 72.5 million total reserves, it is roughly split 50-50 in the sense of 35.7 million of that relates to capital reserves, and obviously that they are earmarked therefore for capital activity, and the remaining 36.851 relates to revenue reserves. of those revenue reserves, many of them are set aside to manage specific statutory capital risks that we're managing, and therefore are sort of not available in one sense to support our overall resilience, notwithstanding they're there to manage specific risks, etc. I've set out in table 3 those of our reserves that provide broader financial resilience to our revenue position, and there are 3 reserves in particular: budget recovery reserve, pay pressures reserve, and the digital transformation reserve, and also general balances. So the total of those 3 reserves plus general balances, which essentially are those that can support our underlying resilience, equal 17.78 million, which equates to 5.2% of our net revenue budget requirement, and as it says there, is the first time actually that we now creep over that 5% level, which is consistent with our own reserves policy, but is also I guess the sector expectation really of the minimum level of reserves that one would hold to support that general resilience. So positive in that sense, but nonetheless, it still is only at that minimum level of reserves that one would expect. So I think it's also important to note that in broad terms, and I guess I say this in the context of those reserves, that actually we are still managing underlying and challenging service pressures. So of the outturn position, although we have broken even in overall terms, the net position across our services is actually that we spent 4.5 million more than the budget that was allocated, and to the extent we have been able to balance in overall terms in the year, is because of additional funding we had from Welsh Government, some of the windfall income that we had, and corporate budgets that were underspent, including things like interest and capital financing. So whilst it's absolutely positive, as I say, the outturn is a positive result, we mustn't let it obscure, I guess, the underlying financial challenges that we still face across the council. Our demand-led services and the pressures in those remain substantial. We are aware, obviously, that schools are becoming increasingly reliant on loans, etc., and therefore, we need to continue to maintain our focus on transformation and demand management, and continue to protect and look after our financial resilience. So that sort of concludes what I want to say, but obviously happy to take any questions. And as I say, and referencing back to my point about the regulatory stuff, we'll await the conclusion of the financial audit by Audit Wells later in the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Amanda. Thank you very much. Right, questions, please, members. Sally is going to keep her eagle eye out in the chamber there.
Councillor Goronwy is first.
Thank you, Amanda. Just a question you touched on the review of the school funding formula. Can you give me some idea of where and when that is actually happening? Is it already started? And is it likely to be made available before the end of this current council term? Because I think it would be good to review that. And as you say, it's been there since I've been a councillor, and I think it's long overdue. So much has changed in education in my time as a councillor. I think it may well show up some possible savings or benefits to the service.
Thank you, Councillor Goronwy. Yes, so the review has already started. Just to confirm, in that obviously head teachers and as well as education colleagues will be actively, or are being actively involved in consulting on that, and the school budget forum also. The hope and the intention is that we will conclude the work in order that we can make any changes in advance of the 26-27 allocations.
Just so are members involved in that review?
Well, obviously, there's members on the school budget forum, but the decision lies with through the school budget forum. That's the agreed process. But obviously, we can update members in terms of the outcomes in relation to it.
Right. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you for that, Amanda. And will that be coming to FROSC as well as education and skills, please, Amanda?
I haven't given consideration to the route of it at the moment. I guess I would suggest it should just go to one or the other. I don't think it would be appropriate to duplicate the same report through two different committees.
Thanks, Amanda. It's going to have a big impact on our finances, isn't it? So we'll see when the review is nearly at conclusion. We'll see where it goes then. Next we've got is Councillor Anne. And before I bring Councillor Anne in, apologies for those watching online, because while Councillor Gromway was speaking, it was showing Councillor Chris Hughes on the podium, but it is sorted now. So Councillor Anne, you look like Councillor Anne, so that's okay. Go ahead.
And you'll be relieved to know I am Councillor Anne Cowlisher. Thanks very much for that. Continuing on the theme of schools, Amanda, and I appreciate the input that you've put into the report to sort of clarify the position. But in 3.11, I was really shocked actually at your words, because you're saying that that school sector demonstrated considerable financial resilience. And given that obviously I think it's 22 out of 61 schools have had to take out loans to actually survive balanced budgets and transition, it doesn't seem to me to meet the definition of financially resilient. 36% of schools have had to take out loans. And I think the balances, I mean, I know the figure you've got down for balances for school is 4.4, but elsewhere I've read that it's 3.7. I'm not sure if the difference is the actual use of loans for additional 8 schools this year. So I'm just surprised that given the parlous state of finance within schools, where head teachers think that they are circa 5 million having a funding deficit, that really that sentence stands alone. So I just like your comments in terms of it, Amanda. But having said that, we've got by the wing and a prayer in some respects to be 48 grand in credit. But it is really quite dispiriting that we're still 4.5 million adrift, looking at it in terms of the overspends that you share. But that's where the work of this resilience group, who are actually looking at transformation, is really critical to our work and our survival. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anne. I think I take your point about the sentence. I think I was specifically referencing it in the context of 25-26, that they'd shown resilience in that. There'd been an anticipated use of 3.3 million of reserves, and in fact, they didn't use any of those, or across the cohort, the collective position was that in fact actually they built reserves by 76,000. So I think I absolutely take your point that in terms of the financial resilience of schools overall, in an ongoing perspective, it is more challenging, and I have referenced that in the final paragraph 3.22 from that point. So maybe I'd probably intended it to be just focused on 25-26.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks both. Next I can see on my speaker list is Councillor Gareth in the chamber.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions, really, and if I'll start off with the school's loan one, my real concern with the school's loan position is that it's going to put extra pressure on those schools in the next few years, because those loans are going to have to be repaid. So I just like, the total is about 2.3 million now. So I just wondered whether we could have an understanding of, are those, what percentage of those are what I would call distressed loans, where the schools just can't balance their budgets? Or are there loans in there where they've actually invested to improve things and there's a repayment period? And from the distressed ones, do we know how much the annual repayments are going to be going forward? Because that's money that's going to have to come out of those schools' budgets. And my second question is around the reserves. And yeah, congratulations on getting above the 5%. I think that's the first time we've seen those balances above the 5% level since I've been in the council, which is about 4 years now. So that's really good progress on that side of things. But as you quite rightly mentioned about that, there's a bit of caution around that, in that the earmarked reserves form quite a big proportion of that. And I just wondered, whilst our own guidance says 5%, is there a split within that as to what the free reserve should be? And how do we benchmark against other councils? Because to my mind, if it's earmarked, then we've already planned to spend them in one form or another. Whereas the free reserves are there to get us over those bumps and unforeseen circumstances as we see coming up, where we sometimes struggle to actually achieve our budgets and things like that. So are we on a par with everybody else? And should we have a target for actual free reserves rather than a total target for those reserves? Thank you.
Thank you very much. In terms of your questions about the school loans, I don't, apologies, I don't off the top of my head have knowledge about all of the individual loans in terms of whether they've invested, etc. But to the point about which are distressed, for want of a better phrase, I'm confident that in the main, all of those school loans are supported by recovery plans, effectively. So there is an agreed repayment program, which is essentially being funded from structural change or otherwise that might be being made. I think it's only quite a small proportion of those loans where perhaps they're in the category that you describe as distress. So in other words, where perhaps the recovery plan is a little bit less certain. And we continue to work with those schools. So there's no denying it will remain challenging for those schools, because clearly, there are structural changes that they may well have agreed to that have got to be actioned and come through, and those repayments got to be made. And obviously, we also don't know to what extent there are other things coming down the line that might then obviously as well impact and challenge them in terms of those repayments. So apologies, my answer's comparatively broad, but in the main, I'm confident that there are detailed recovery plans in relation to those. In terms of the reserves, I guess free reserves, so as you say, unallocated, although I've noted there in table 3, I've actually clubbed 4 reserves together, essentially being our general reserves plus the other 3 earmarked reserves to effectively, that's what I'm saying are what you would what you use in your vernacular, free reserves. So we don't have, although the budget reserve, the pay pressure reserve, digital transformation reserve are sat as earmarked reserves, there are no there are no agreed plans of activity against those. So in other words, they are the free reserves. In terms of and that 5%, I think, as I say, that's I don't know the level of the detail across the whole of Wales in terms of the level of reserves that they have. I think most people would be working at that 5% as the target for their general balances, their free reserves. Where others sit in terms of the levels that they have, I'm not explicitly cited on today. But and whilst if we were to go back 3 or 4 years, we absolutely categorically had the lowest level of reserves in Wales. I don't think that is the case anymore. I think through the approach that members have been taking in supporting our budget decisions to not further erode the reserves and to try in actual fact to build reserves through short-term savings such as the capital financing, etc. I think we have built ourselves into a little bit of a better position. Nonetheless, I think we will still be in the bottom half and the bottom quarter in reality of the table across Wales, because some local authorities have very substantial reserves from their historic positions, and we're not as blessed in that. In terms of our earmarked reserves, I think the ones that are sat across services are there to support spending plans, and actually that was one of the things I didn't actually explicitly say when I presented. One of the recommendations is obviously for members to confirm those use and reasons why earmarked reserves are sat there. But we do then have in our corporate reserves other reserves which are earmarked for potential risk and or specific challenges that we know we have. Time will tell on some of those whether they actually explicitly come to fruition, and some of that can be released back or not, in fact, might be needed. So I think it's a bit of a mix, but yeah, I guess whether we seek to build another category of reserves, it's certainly something we could think of, but or consider. But I think, as I say, that 5% in terms of that general balance marker is the sector standard.
Thank you, Amanda. And as you say, it's a damn sight better than it was a few years ago. So, well, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you both. Next on my list is Councillor Chris Hughes in the Chamber.
Thanks, Chair. Bearing in mind that overall the department's overspent the last year's budget initially by 4.5 million, how much of that money is one-off funding and how much is sustainable that we would be carrying forward into the next financial year?
Thank you, Councillor Gus. I think I'm hopeful, obviously, that when we set the budget for the current financial year, we did obviously reflect on the pressures that we were facing at the time and looked to build into the current year budget those that were ongoing pressures, and certainly you'll be aware, so for instance, I guess within that 4.5 million, I think the primary service that continues to face incredible service demand pressure is obviously social care, housing as well, home to school transport. These are things that we know we are facing continual cost pressure on, and when we set the current year budget, members supported within the budget significant additional allocations for those services, and certainly the intention and hope is that they are therefore being met now in the current year. So I'm confident that the structural element of that was built into the current year budget. I guess what we continue to face, nonetheless, is continued demand essentially for services, and I think probably the factor that plays into that as well, which obviously has cost implication, is the complexity of some of that demand. So I think I feel more confident now that we have, and you'll recall when we set the current year budget that we talked very much about not only bringing the budget up to I guess the activity levels at that time, but to try and build in and predict some future demand into that as well, and we certainly did that in the decisions that you took in the current year. So I feel confident that it's largely reflected in the current year budget. But you'll see again when we move on to the outturn report that we're already facing pressure, but not to the same scale. So hopefully addressed, but can't be guaranteed because of the nature of demand.
Thank you.
Have we got any more questions from anybody?
Councillor Charlie McCoubry.
Oh, so lovely. Thank you. Councillor Charlie in the chamber.
I'm Joe Cadera, the Board Pawb. Thanks, Amanda, for a really well written and set out report. Clearly, it's an achievement to get to essentially break even with a very small surplus, and I'm delighted to see our reserves go above 5% for the first time, certainly since I've been a councillor here. A common sort of criticism we get is that we can't live within our budget, but clearly shows that the areas of pressure where it's demand led in terms of sort of our social care services and homeschool transport. These are numbers, and when we get more numbers, it costs more. So it's fiendishly difficult at the start of each financial year to actually try and predict exactly what that cost will be. And there is an element of swings and roundabouts. Some areas of underspend, some areas of overspend. But we have to meet that demand. It's not a choice that we have. So having strong reserves there to meet years where inevitably there may be more demand, more spend is really, really important. So as you say, lots of underlying pressures, but it's a better position we've been in for a very long time, which is testament to the work of all the officers who've been involved in this. So on that note, Chair, I'd like to move the recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Charlie. So we've had a proposer. Have we a seconder for the recommendations, which are on page 61?
Councillor Nia. Yeah.
Lovely. Diolch, Nia. Okay, can we open the vote then, please? Has everyone voted? Yep. Okay, let's close the vote then, please. Diolch, and that is carried. Thank you very much, members and officers. Okay, we now move on to the next item, which is the capital programme 25-26, the outturn position. This is pages 73 to 88, and it's again Councillor Chris Cater and Amanda Hughes introducing and presenting. So, Councillor Chris.
Thank you again, Chair. So the committee has in front of it this morning the actual capital outturn position for 25-26. And confirms the capital budget of 58.282 million to be carried forward and added to the 26-27 capital programme. As members will know, regular monitoring reports have been presented to Overview and Scrutiny and Cabinet, and since the last Q3 report, there have now been further amendments of 5.019 million, which I hope will be supported by members today. The alterations actually result from schemes funded by external grants as well as other accounting adjustments. So I'm sure Amanda will give further information and explanation if you want it. And I think the variation table with the accompanying notes identifies the changes clearly anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Amanda?
Thank you, Chair. probably not got too much extra to say further to Councillor Chris, but so this sets out essentially the detailed capital programme for 25-26 as was, which when you last considered it at the third quarter stood at 116.497 million. The quarter four variations are set out in Appendix 1, and you can see from that essentially have been made up of changes as a result of additional grant income. There's one adjustment I'll perhaps just explain because it looks a bit incongruous otherwise, is you'll see in Appendix 1 on page 78 that there is a figure of 2108 in the capital reserve column, which relates to PFI lifecycle costs. That is just an accounting adjustment whereby the costs during the year sit in the revenue account and are funded from a budget in the revenue account, but an element of the PFI lifecycle cost relates to capital spend. So the element that relates to capital spend at the year end, we do an accounting adjustment for and effectively move the spend and the budget from revenue into capital to fund that. So although it shows as a change and an increase in council funding, it is matched from revenue budget to fund that and actually has a nil net effect. So therefore, you can see that aside from that accounting adjustment, the vast majority of the amendments in quarter four were merely to reflect additional grant funding or changes that we'd received during the year. So therefore, on the assumption that those variations are agreed, the capital programme at the end of 25-26 stood at 121.516 million. We actually spent during the year 25 in last year, so should I say, we actually spent 58.642 million. Members will be fully aware that a number of our capital schemes last for more than 1 year. In fact, some are several years long, and so that's perfectly normal then that we won't have spent all of that money at the end of the year, and therefore there's a desire therefore to carry forward the outstanding capital budget that's not yet been spent. There have, however, been some adjustments of about 4.5 million, which is budgets that are no longer actually required for various reasons. Some of that actually connected to clarification around grants, etc. And you'll see in Table 1, we've also set out how the capital budget was then financed. And that obviously then plays through into our overall borrowing costs and the capital receipts and reserves, etc. that we have. You'll continue to see, in fact, that of the 58.6 million we spent last year, 37.5 of it was actually funded from grants and contributions, which really demonstrates actually, how much of our capital programme is funded from grants and contributions, and obviously they support the council significantly in doing capital activity, because the actual underlying ability and funding that we provided for capital otherwise is quite limited. So the report, apart from concluding on the activity during the year, is then obviously, as Councillor Chris has already outlined, seeks approval that the remaining capital budget that's needed to complete the schemes from 25-26 is carried forward and into the 26-27 capital budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Amanda. Okay, have we got any questions, members? Any hands up?
Councillor Gronwy Edwards.
No, I was just going to thank.
Showing as Councillor Chris, but never mind. Carry on, Councillor Gronwy.
Don't worry, I know who I am, I think. Thanks, Amanda, for that update on that and running through it. So I would happily move the recommendation to 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 and 2.4.
Dear Councillor Gronwy. Have we got any more speakers? No. Have we, in that case, got a seconder?
Yeah, Councillor Chris Hughes is seconding.
is seconding. Okay. That's great. So if we could open the vote then, please, that would be really helpful. Everyone could vote. And there, I think everyone's voted now. Could we close the electronic vote then, please, members? And that is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, that's quicker than expected. You're doing well this morning, members. Okay, we now move on to the next report, which is the revenue budget for 26-27, and this is the Q1 monitoring report, and you'll find this on pages 89 to 103. And it's again the double act of Councillor Chris Cater and Amanda Hughes. Councillor Chris is going to introduce. Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We're moving into the current financial year. So Council approved the revenue budget for 2026-2027 on the 5th of March this year. This report contains a forecast net revenue shortfall of 1.893 million following the first quarter. Services are working thoroughly to contain expenditure within their approved budgets, but the projected service pressures in both social care and housing are bringing in overspends at the moment. Housing spend containment initiatives are yet to bring in all the anticipated positive results, and I'm sure Katie Clubb, who's sitting behind me, will give us some detail on that this morning. I would like to add that we are also waiting the outcome of pay negotiations, and we have a longer term risk around the restructuring of the NJC pay spine to rectify pay differential erosion at the bottom of the scale. So members will be fully aware that as we work our way towards formulating a balanced budget for 27-28, the consideration of statutory service requirements, our deliverability, financial risk, and our corporate plan priorities will require tough decisions if council tax rises are to be kept to a minimum when we next set a budget. So with that, I'll hand back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Dear Councillor Chris, thank you for that. Okay, have we got questions, members? Who's the first?
Councillor Gareth Jones and then Councillor Anne McCaffrey.
Oh, thank you. I just like a bit of an understanding or an explanation as to whether some of the pressures that we're actually seeing on the social services side of things, is that anyway tied into what's happening at Betsy? Are they pushing stuff onto us that they would normally pick up? Are we finding more pressure because obviously they're under pressure to get people out of the hospitals for quite understandable reasons, but then when they actually come home, then they, you know, are we saying that they need more support at home? And I suppose that ties into, you know, are we on top of what Betsy owe us at the moment, and are we getting a fair share of that health budget? And are we able to, you know, are we able to bill them for more for some of these pressures? And my second comment is just, yeah, I think Councillor Chris Cater knocked the nail on the head when he said that these pressures actually have a real effect on council tax, because just looking at alone, you know, we're looking probably in council tax proportions, it's, you know, it's 1.8 onto the council tax straight away with these overspends. So it's really, really important that we understand why they're happening and how we can actually get on top of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gareth. I'll defer to my colleagues who obviously know much more detail than I do in a second. But just to reflect one point, I do think in relation to and I have referenced it in paragraph 3.3, that I think we have been prudent in preparing this quarter one forecast in relation to income and our expectations of income, and I think some of that will reflect in terms of the income that we would be due from Betws Cadwaladr as well, because I think sometimes there's that balance between whether we account for the income and reflect the income in the outturn position at the point we have had it factually confirmed that there's an agreed contribution, or do we do it at the point where we think hopefully we'll get it. And I think at this stage we've probably erred on the prudent side and only done it at the with the known cases, whilst knowing that we have others that we are still in discussions and negotiating about. So I am hopeful anyway in relation to the forecast that actually it will be an improving position as we go through the year, because we've been prudent at this stage. But in terms of the more specific detail, I'll hand over to Kat, if I may.
Yes, I think the short answer to your question is yes, that there are pressures that primarily were health board funded previously, and those pressures are coming on to us. At the moment, we have pieces of work around packages of care delays. So the discharge work that we're doing, that does put more pressure on us in terms of the care that would have taken place in the hospital is coming out of the hospital to us, and that therefore that is a cost pressure on us. And the preventative work that we're doing in terms of the flow into hospitals as well is another cost pressure on us. So those are pressures that cost is then being moved from a health board budget to a health authority pressure. There's also pressure around the way the fees are set in the health board. So you've got two main fees in the health board. You've got FNC, which is funding nursing care, and you've got CHC, which is continuing healthcare. At the moment, the continuing healthcare, which is the enhanced rate for more need, is lower than the FNC. So we fund most of the FNC. We get a top up from the health board, but really those cases when they escalate should transfer across to becoming CHC. But because the CHC fee isn't sufficient, that transfer isn't happening. So providers are not telling us that things are escalating because the fees, and it's not in their interest to do that, let alone the process of actually getting CHC acknowledgement that the case is a CHC case. That is very difficult and very entrenched at the moment, and there is a piece of work regionally that we're doing to sort that out in terms of recognising when care is escalating. So that doesn't, both those things don't help in terms of those pressures. So yes, there are key things that are affecting our budget. And then as Amanda says, we've got unresolved disputes with particularly high cost packages where the contribution from health hasn't been resolved yet, and we've got dispute processes in place for that. So as Amanda says, we've been conservative in terms of our what percentage we think we're going to get, but versus what we should be getting if the guidance was applied correctly. So yeah, we've been conservative in that respect as well. So there are those sorts of things going on in the budget, in terms of our relationship with the health board at the moment.
Yeah, really appreciate that. It's a really difficult and, massive pressure, and, we have to actually step in and fulfill our obligations. But unless the health board and health, that budget trickles through and comes through to us, the reality is our council taxpayers will end up picking up the bill for it, or other services will have to be cut to actually pay for it. So, it's interesting to understand the pressures and what's actually driving them, and what the consequences are ultimately. Thank you.
Thank you both. Yes, thank you for that answer, Kat. Yes, the CHC has long been a thorn in everyone's side, hasn't it? But it's getting worse now. Betsy are employing ever more. I think it's ramping up, isn't it, at the levels of what they choose to use against the local authorities, and it's absolutely not acceptable. We're caring for the people; they should be paying their way, and it's just not right. Thank you very much for that and your continuing work on this. I know how hard you're all working in social care behind the scenes. So the next person we've got is, I think we've got Councillor Anne next. Was it Councillor Anne or Councillor Bromley?
Yes, Councillor Anne, followed by Councillor Gronwy.
Lovely, deal.
Okay, thanks, Chair. And thanks for the interesting questions from Gareth and the responses from officers, because it really does focus on some of the challenges actually which shouldn't really exist if true partnership working was in process, really, despite best efforts of our officers. But my question is probably a bit more general and a bit more about resilience and the work that we're doing. I mean, in 3.3, it's clarifying that we've got, after only 3 months, just short of a £2 million funding overspend. And I think that's worrying. I think, however, it's not unusual, if my memory serves me right, but I haven't sort of looked into it. But, you know, in this climate, with increased oversight, it is worrying that we've got 1.9 million overspend. And I just wonder if we're looking at, you know, solutions. I mean, we in the last report, Amanda quantified that there are structural budget issues, and I think we all know that. And obviously there was 4.5 million overspend for the year annualised, which gives a bit of an additional context. So my question is, what assurance can officers give that in actual fact we're tackling those structural budget issues, and obviously the fact that there's overspends there to be addressed? And you know, we also talked as members about wanting to make further contribution into the resilience programme, which hadn't seemed to be coming up with cashable savings as yet. So what assurance can Amanda give about the cashable savings coming on? And indeed, can we have clarification about when the member meeting to actually help look at the detail of what the resilience work that's been doing, the transformational work that's been doing, when that will take place? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. To those points then first. So just to clarify, obviously, suggestions or you know, consideration of how we can manage our overall budget position is being tackled from various angles, I guess. So and certainly the resilience work and the work being done under the resilience strategy is one thread of that, but not all plans around service transformation and ideas for making savings within individual services is rooted that way. And you know, so the normal, for want of a better phrase, the normal activity that we undertake around member involvement in considering and looking at the suggestions and ideas coming from services will continue as normal, and in fact, you know, those budget working groups are planned and in the diaries for later in the year. So all in the context then of where we are in terms of meeting and planning for next year's budget, all services are working you know, currently in terms of developing and thinking about ways in which we can do things differently, or ultimately, you know, what might be options, albeit them unpalatable, about what we may not do anymore, subject to our overall pressures. So and then separately, as I say, albeit linked, is work through the resilience strategy. And I guess that has more, although there are specific things in there, specific service activities within the resilience board and resilience work, it also is looking, I guess, at more cross-cutting activity and ways of working. So for argument, looking at the use of technology or looking at customer and how we might refocus that. So I must confess, I don't know off the top of my head. I can't recall. Apologies. What the what's been agreed in terms of how I think the Resilience Board periodically. Councillor Julie will come to my aid. Sorry, go on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anne. So I've asked Sian to put something in the diary in the first 2 weeks of September. So she's having a look now to have, so it was an informal discussion with members around the Resilience Board to just look at where we're at, what's happening, and hopefully hear suggestions maybe from members, so everybody has the opportunity to feed into what we're doing and also get the feedback. It's starting to really take shape now, and I'm starting to see where those savings may be. So yeah, I shall update members. You should get that this week. You'll get a date in your diaries. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah. Can I just respond? I mean, I think that's great. I suppose my concern is that every quarter is our experience that we add to that overspending, and then somehow at the very end we manage to come out of the hat with some additional one-off funding, whatever. And my overall concern is, what are we doing to get our base right? How we're actually adjusting our cross-cutting base, really, to quote Amanda's sort of comments, because if we don't continually evaluate and change and adapt, and we just live in perhaps silos and fixed ways of doing things, we're never going to get the sort of cashable savings that members are looking for and I'm looking for. And I think that the panel assessment group actually expressed concern about as well. So it is this focus on where do the solutions lie, and not leaving it to we just get to December and then start to just talk about what we're going to do in individual services. That's the worry for me, is the bigger picture solutions. So I look forward to that meeting, Julie, and hopefully we can perhaps have a clearer understanding of direction of travel on this. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We now move on to next. We've got Councillor Gronwydd and Councillor Chris H. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point that I think Chris touched on in his introducing this item was the pay and conditions. I sat for a number of years on the LGA NJC, and Andy Burnham was the chairman at that time, so I knew him quite well. And he's very much in favour of improving the living standard of people. So I'm just concerned that with the announcement he's made in the first 2 weeks of his tenure, that he will be looking at the lower paid sectors and probably be quite supportive of higher pay increases. So I am concerned that we will inevitably face higher pay increases or requests. And I think the unions are particularly buoyant, knowing that Andy Burnham's background, that he is very supportive of the lower paid sector, that this may well be facing a higher pay increase than anticipated. So, I'm glad you touched on that, but just going back from my experience on the NJC, that very often the government might decide, Labour government might well decide to increase the public sector pay. So just think that we need to keep on the horizon. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Councillor Gronwydd. Do you need to respond to that, Amanda?
The question is just a concern I have that we may well face additional pay pressures.
Okay, deal, Councillor Gronwydd. Now, Councillor Chris in the chamber.
Thanks, Chair. Again, coming back to a similar question I had before, how much of the overspend in social services is demand-led? Obviously, we can't impact demand-led, because if people turn up requiring a service, they need the service. But how much is demand-led and how much, again, is structural? And on the housing issue, We have a £350,000 deficit there. I wonder whether we now have a revised timeline for bringing that back into.
Thank you. Just in terms of the social care pressure, I think as I've said and as we've discussed, I think I am hopeful that the position on that will improve as we go through the year, because we have chosen, I have consciously chosen to be prudent in the context of our forecasts on income, and hopefully that will therefore improve. I mean, I think in terms of fundamentally, the remaining pressure is definitely demand led. As I say, when we set the current year budget, we actually built in altogether around £12 million into social care when we set the 26-27 budget. Some of that was obviously to reflect price increases, fee increases for care, independent care providers, etc. And the rest of that, obviously there was money as well, demand for children's services of around 5. And then about 7 in broad terms went into adults, and of that it was split probably about 3 million for the fees and about 4 million for demand, and that demand at that point was seeking both to catch up the demand to where it was, but also to forecast demand into the current year. And I think in the main, I feel confident that we have largely done that forecast reasonably well, but inevitably, as has already been outlined by somebody, it's very difficult to predict with absolute accuracy, and we continue to work very closely. Graham, the accountant who sat over there, works very, very closely with Jenny and Kat and Steph and her team and the teams to really be on top and be clear about the demands that we have, to make sure that we're properly reflecting that work. Actually, further to that as well, you'll be aware that we have members supported us appointing some researchers, and one of the pieces of work one of those researchers has been doing is also about actually trying to predict future demand to allow us to finesse further the forecasting that we do. But obviously it always anyway will only ever be a forecast, and actual may well differ. So but we continue to try and be as on top of that as we possibly can, but and I'm sure and as Kat has already referenced as well, we are getting pressures, I guess, which aren't necessarily demand as it was from actually our vulnerable residents who we're supporting, but pressures because actually maybe costs are falling on us when in fact they might have fell elsewhere before, or perhaps there was a preparedness to take up a bigger share of the cost elsewhere before, and that's becoming harder as everybody is trying to manage their budget position. So I think I've gone on for quite a long time to essentially say I think it's demand led predominantly, but as I say, we'll continue to monitor that very closely. Thank you. Oh, in terms of housing, sorry, my apology. If I may, I'll chuck over. That's a poor phrase, isn't it? Apologies for that strange wording. I'll pass over to Katie.
Happy to have it chucked over. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's worth coming in on this. Obviously, councillors won't be surprised to know it's the emergency housing budget which creates the pressure. But I think some context on this is really important, because this is an area where we set out plans to transform, and those plans are delivering results, and it is the pace and the ambition of the budgets that were set which is creating language like pressures and overspends which make people believe this might be growing costs, not reducing. So if I just get some context behind that, obviously we've talked a lot this morning about demand-led budget. This is very much a demand-led budget, and part of the issue last year was around a demand pressure in Q2, which was unexpected. We set out plans a couple of years ago to significantly transform our temporary accommodation and emergency accommodation. situation in terms of preventing homelessness. We talked about increasing supply, we talked about increasing prevention, and we talked about alternative solutions, and all those plans are coming into play. The outcome at the end of Q1 this year, we've seen a 30% drop in the number of households in emergency accommodation. So that transformation plan we set is delivering. The costs are reducing. From the 23-24 year, this year we're projecting to spend around £1 million less on that emergency accommodation budget. We started from an overspend position, and the pace is what is creating the pressure. And again, that warning, it is a demand-led budget, and we do sometimes see spikes which aren't easily explained. There are a number of factors last year that created the slower than anticipated pace, which again has had a knock on this year. Some projects and developments, so there was a mixture. Some things were out of our control, some things were in. Some projects and developments within the plan were delayed, so the anticipated saving wasn't delivered fully in that year. In 25-26, again, we had a demand spike in Q2, which took a while to recover from, and some reductions in expected grant as well. So there's a mixture of things impacting, but the trend line is downward, and we're really confident that the full efficiencies we set out will be delivered. It's going to be over a longer time frame than we'd originally said, which is creating the pressure this year.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, both. And demand, yes, the demand-led in social care, of course, is the likes of Butt and a Doll and projects like that are working so well. That's helping with that, isn't it? And just a quick question myself from Katie. Are the RSLs helping as you'd be expecting with the housing demand? Are we getting lots of support from our RSLs, please, Katie? Thank you.
Yeah, as you know, not being non-stock holding, the RSLs play a really big part for us. They are certainly delivering one of our biggest issues. Obviously, everyone knows in terms of ending homelessness, we need a supply of affordable homes. A significant increase this year. I'm sure people will see around the county construction ending and people being placed into the new homes. So they are delivering in that way. We also in Conway have a lot of support from them in terms of allocations. So through our allocations policy, the RSLs allocate their homes to who we select from our allocations policy. So we get support there as well. And they've stepped up where there's grant available. So we know we have TACP for acquisition of empty homes. And we've never had any issue in spending that funding, which is allocated to us, which again, we rely on the RSLs to deliver.
Thank you very much for that, Katie. That's good to hear that we're getting that level of support. I can't see any more speakers. Sally, are we okay?
No, can't see anybody. Oh, Councillor Goodon was just put his mic on.
I know that Amanda moved on, but I think she was going to respond to my question about the pressures from the NGC and the National Pay Review. I don't know if she still wants to comment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate. Thanks, Councillor Gormley, that in a way you were just making an observation, but I think actually just to take advantage really of the observation to just draw members' attention to the point I have raised in the report on paragraph 3.12, and also Councillor Chris mentioned it. I do think this is a real concern for us because essentially what's been happening over the last few years. And obviously, totally understand from a moral point of view, if you want to call it that, why obviously there's a desire to increase low pay. And obviously in the UK as a whole, there have been big inroads, for want of a better phrase, in reducing low pay over the last few years, and in fact the national living wage has been rising, has consistently risen above the rate of inflation for pretty much the whole of the time since the national living wage has been in, and certainly it has in the last few years risen well above the rate of inflation. And what that has meant, therefore, is that the headroom between the lowest scale point of local authority wages and the national living wage has become quite small and has got eroded, and actually local government has found itself in as a sector in really only just being marginally above the national living wage at the bottom end of its scales, and obviously as an employer, that's not somewhere where the sector would want to be, and one of the methods that the national employer has been using to keep the minimum or the bottom scale point ahead of the national living wage is by taking off scale points from the scale, from the scale ranges, and what that means for us now is that following the previous pay awards that have been agreed, we are now in a position that from the start of the current financial year, our lowest grade, GO1, only now has one scale point within it. So in other words, it's a fixed salary point. There is no incremental progression for that in that role. Now, whilst that's not necessarily a preferential place to be, it is a place that nonetheless we can be. However, if the national employer chooses to use the method of taking the bottom scale point away again in its attempt to stay ahead of the national living wage, then that actually will result in us needing to do quite a substantial pay review, because it will then mean that effectively there is no grade GO1 anymore, which means the GO1 would need to be paid a GO2, but then of course our job evaluation scheme reflects that a GO2 and a GO3 and a GO4, etc. Attract points through job evaluation, warranting a higher pay level, and essentially what it means is there'll be a ripple effect up through the grades, which probably wouldn't completely finish even sort of comfortably from a mathematical point of view up until about grade 5 or grade 6. And bear in mind the vast majority of our staff sit within the grades 1 to 6. But even if you didn't ripple the effect further, it's worth also remembering that actually what's happened again over the last few years is that all of our scale points have been significantly compressed. And I've set out in paragraph 3.15 there what's actually happened. So effectively, during the last 10 years, the national living wage has increased by 76.5%. The lowest scale point in our scales has increased by 68%. So you can see, therefore, that that's where the narrowing of the lowest pay scale compared with the national living wage has happened. But actually, at our higher grade, so at our G12 grade, my apology, that grade over the last decade has only increased by 40.5%. So therefore, in the last decade, the relative difference in the pay the G12 has received compared to a G1 has been massively compressed. And that, therefore, is obviously playing into our ability to retain and recruit staff, etc., etc. So, there are several risks that are being caused here. There's a very big financial risk, which is that if that scale point is taken off the bottom, we will need a pay review, which will increase the pay of a significant proportion of our staff, and that will need funding. But there's also then the wider problem that our scales generally are being compressed. So actually there's not a lot of difference increasingly by being promoted up through the grades, and that is playing in potentially to people's decisions around whether they want to seek promotion, as well as more wider and general recruitment and retention issues. So whilst I appreciate I touched on it in the report, I thought it was useful while Councillor Gorman gave me the opportunity to perhaps stress that a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda, and thank you for the question observation, Councillor Gronwy. Well, if I have no more questions, could we have a proposer and a seconder for this report, please?
Councillor Charlie McCoubrey is proposing and Councillor Emily Owen seconding.
Lovely, thank you. If we could open the vote then, please. Okay. As a yes, everyone's voted, and close the vote, please. Thank you, and that is carried, members. Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to the revised capital programme 26-27, the Q1 monitoring report, and this you can find on pages 104 to 123. And again, it's Councillor Chris and Amanda that's going to take this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. This report updates the committee on the Q1 financial activity on our total capital programme as we progress through 26-27. We have already, or you have already debated this morning approval of a carry forward of 58.282 million from 25-26, with the revisions in front of us due to a range of external grant monies for specific schemes totalling 15.899 million and various other scheme adjustments. We now come to revised 26-27 capital programme of 1,241 million. Have I got that right? There is a specific request seeking approval for the use of 121,000 of the Fit Conway carbon reduction budget for LED across sites in Abergele and Colwyn Bay. That's in front of members this morning. Generally, we know that many of the capital schemes are complex in nature and are delivered over a period of more than 1 year. So I welcome the useful new appendix, which has been provided for us, which gives us a progress update on capital projects over £1 million. Again, thanks go to the finance team for collating all this information, and that's been done, of course, in accordance with the business planning framework and capital governance framework. So I hand over back to you, Chair and Amanda. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Chris. Amanda?
Thank you very much, Chair. So perhaps just to focus in on the additional recommendation to do with the Fit Conway carbon reduction capital budget. So the other stuff hopefully is self-explanatory and follows the normal course of information that you've provided that you're provided and you're used to seeing, which is to amend the additions in the first quarter, which have come largely from grant, and obviously it brings forward into here as well the carry forwards that hopefully will be approved in terms of the previous report that you've already considered. But just to reference explicitly the 121,000 request here for Fit Conway. So essentially this budget is already available. So in that context, it isn't a request for new money. It is a budget that's already sat within the capital programme. But the reason explicitly that it's asking for recognition of the environment is because when members considered the business case that set aside that money for carbon reduction match funding, it was at the time based on decarbonisation projects and submissions that had been submitted in relation to some of our leisure facilities. Because of the approvals that we then subsequently had for those external grants, there is actually money unallocated within that budget as it stands, and so this is a request to use 121,000 for effectively for the same purposes, so for the purpose of carbon reduction, but to install LED lighting across sites in both Colwyn Bay and Abergele, and that will result in reduced energy consumption and financial savings of around £25,000 per year. The scheme as a whole will be costing around £300,000, but we've had a Sports Wales grant offer for the remaining funding, but it needs that match to be able to take that forward. So as I say, it's just for transparency really and clarification that members are happy to via from within that existing budget to fund that for a scheme that essentially is for the same overall purpose that the budget was awarded in the first instance. And then the only other thing to just note is that as at 30th of June of this total programme, around 10 million has actually been spent, and then to recognise, as Councillor Chris has said, that we've introduced a new appendix which we plan to provide on an ongoing basis, which is to provide a bit of narrative really around the progress on capital projects which have a budget of more than £1 million. So I hope members will find that useful going forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Amanda. And have we got any speakers? Councillor Gareth is the
Sorry,
first.
it's me again. Just wanted to get a better understanding about the Fit Conwy spend. In that the overall spend, we're looking at a payback over 12 years. On our contribution, we're looking at a payback over 5 years, which seems quite a long period for that investment in LED lighting. So my question is that, if we were to spend 121,000 anywhere in the council, is that the best value for money we can get? Or are we spending it because it's on the carbon reduction? Because really we should be looking at, where do we get the best return for the investment? And I know it's relatively small in the overall picture of things, but it's a question worth asking as far as I was concerned.
Thank you. I guess. I take your point. Is 5 years a good enough payback period or not? I suppose what I would also observe is that, whilst obviously this does generate financial savings, there's also net carbon benefits, as it were, and the priorities around that are being driven by the carbon board that exists, and they're supportive of this project. Whether you could say, well, actually don't do this and actually we'll have the 121,000 back to do something else altogether. I guess that question hasn't been considered because the budget has been allocated for carbon reduction, and this project fits within the purposes of the budget and the allocation that's been given. So I guess that wider question hasn't been asked. It's a fair question to ask. I'm not aware of anything explicitly where if we redirected 120,000 we could get a better payback. Off the top of my head.
That's fair enough. I suppose my point is maybe it is a question that we should be asking ourselves, because in our financial position, can we, yes, it's all very well and very right to look at carbon reductions, but, is that our top priority as a local authority, or could we spend the money more effectively somewhere else? Thank you.
So thanks for that. Next we've got Councillor Chris and then Councillor Abdul.
Diolch, Chair. Thank you. Looking at the total spend, what are the ongoing revenue costs that will arise from these capital spend, and have they been accounted into this year's budget?
Well, I off the top of my head, I don't know of the whole capital programme. I don't know what the revenue implications of that are in a total quantum. Obviously, when members consider the capital budget and we approve schemes into the capital budget, the revenue implications of that are considered and built in. I think in the main. So I guess in broad.
Perhaps I haven't explained myself properly. I'm talking about the 16 million that we're adding into the budget that wouldn't have gone through the capital budget earlier in the year, and there isn't a great deal of detail in the report about that. It's just they're just one line issues. So I'm just looking at what revenue implications there are. Have they been accounted for in the budget? And yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an absolutely valid point, Councillor Chris, and I think one which we need to be very alert to when accepting capital grants, because as you say, it's all very well that we get the capital grant, but if there's then an ongoing revenue implication or a future maintenance implication, then we need to make sure that we have considered those. So I think a number of the grants that have been brought in are following confirmation of grants which we usually get, such as the education buildings maintenance grants, etc., which I guess in the main actually are supporting and helping us with that future maintenance cost. Other grants, I don't have the detail to. I'm assuming that services, when they are accepting these grants, are properly considering the implications of them and making sure that they're happy in accepting that they're not creating an additional burden for the council.
Thank you. And I'm guessing in the same way, my other question was going to be, when we see the capital budget at the during the budget allocation process, we get all the business cases. We're able to go through all of those cases to understand exactly what's where and to prioritise them. These obviously just come forward and they're generally not been part of that original business case. So I'm just concerned that we don't get to see that detail and understand what those business cases are actually delivering.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the time that you get to see them is when we're adding them into the capital programme, as you say. Yeah, it's a valid point, Councillor Chris, and one we can go away and consider about how we. I guess ultimately, services, will be applying for grants in order to support our council priorities and objectives, and one would assume that they're only pursuing grants that do that. So in that sense, I'm confident. But yeah, as to sort of the detail of how we consider you considering those or members considering those ahead of those applications, we'll have to think about that. But obviously, as such, this is how the council has done this for its custom and practice.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Amanda. I had a chat with Councillor Chris Cater, and we are looking at all that sort of thing to make it more transparent for members. So I'm sure Councillor Chris will have some ideas on that going forward. Are you happy, Councillor Chris H?
Yeah, it is what it is. We can't get that information at this late stage, so fine.
Thanks, Chris. Next, we've got Councillor Abdul and Councillor Bromley. Councillor Abdul, I hope we can hear you okay.
Well, can you hear me? Just about.
Abdul, sorry, do you mind taking your headset off? I think it might improve things.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
It's still very, very crackly, Abdul. Try your best.
Okay. Thank you. Firstly, I might have to declare interest because I am a member of the Fit Conway, but I'm sure others are too. But regarding the question that was raised by one of my colleagues, I think it's more than carbon reduction. We're getting funding for it, and it's 75% funding, and it's also spent to save. So we'd be saving like 25,000 a year, which is a lot of savings. And therefore, I think it's more than just carbon reduction, which is really important as well. Therefore, I just want to propose that we accept the recommendation from 2.1 to 2.24. So my proposal is that we accept this recommendation, Chair. I hope you heard me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Abdul. Excellent. Well, I've got Councillor Gronwy next, and then I'll go for a seconder for your proposal. Councillor Gronwy.
Yeah, I'm fully in support of the recommendation. Just one observation though, is I think it's laudable that we go for LED lighting wherever we can and to reduce our carbon reduction. And the only thing I would observe that we put in these lightings and then for whatever reason we decide to leave them on day and night. Like this room today is fully lit with lighting when there's ample daylight outside there. I've noted it in my own business where we have a riding school and a riding stables. Because I installed LED lighting, the girls there tend to leave lighting all day when there's no real need for it. I think we do need to manage, having put in LED lights and things, that we actually manage them accordingly. We don't just use electric just for the sake of using it because it's a lower form of energy.
Thank you, Councillor Gronwy. Next, we've got Councillor Charlie.
Yeah, job chair. Raised some very valid points there, Chris, but I think it's important to note that 15.9 million of this is grant funding. I think our officers are to be congratulated for consistently looking for and being successful in achieving grant funding that we can spend within the authority. But as you say, it'd be nice to have a little more detail about some of that. And I totally agree in terms of that return for what we're spending in the LED at 25k a year. It's over 20% return on that capital investment. And obviously that will be a legacy for a long time. So on that basis, I'm more than happy to second Abdul's proposal, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Charlie. Well, I can't see any more. My screen does not say we have any more speakers. So we've had a proposer and we've had a seconder. So if we could open the vote, please. And that's everyone voted. If we could close the vote, please. Thank you, members. And that was carried. So thank you to all concerned. We now move on to our final report, which is the in-year business case, transitions, raising attainment and choices, the track report, pages 124 to 148. And Councillor Chris is again going to introduce and Amanda is going to deliver the report to us. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. My final report this morning. Or was it this afternoon yet? Anyway, so yeah, I'm going to use the track for the shorthand for the Transitions, Raising Attainment and Choices programme name. This report puts forward an in-year business case to fund the continuation of this valuable track team for the rest of 26-27. This is an exceptional circumstance as the UK SPF grant funding has finished and the scheme, which is for under 16 vulnerable learners, is unfortunately not eligible for the new local growth fund, which replaces the UK SPF. I leave officers to elaborate on the value of the scheme, but any of us who are school governors will recognise the effective early intervention and tailored support it gives young people, and will know how strong relationships with schools, families and partner agencies have been developed to achieve this. It ticks many boxes, Chair, and has a proven success. Also, its cost is relatively modest compared to the potential consequences if it ends, which would be increased demand on social care, youth justice, mental health support schemes, and homelessness, which would all result to some extent. However, and I'm a Finance Cabinet member, members must be aware that there are no unallocated funds in the 26-27 budget, which we passed back in March this year. The 163,000 needed will have to be funded from the Council's general balances. Looking forward to 26-27, officers will have to seek alternative sustainable funding sources, which will hopefully come from new grant sources rather than service budget reconfiguration or putting in a business case for 26-27. So a business case for 26-27 would have to be considered against other priority business cases. And this morning, Chair, we've already seen the serious budgetary pressures we face as we work forward to setting that legal balanced 26-27 budget. So I hand back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. And before I bring Amanda in to go over it, I see Councillor Aaron is there as a Cabinet Member for Education. I will bring him in after Amanda's done her report. And yes, I agree with you, Chris. Those of us that are governors know very much the value of this excellent scheme and how it works with our most vulnerable. So thanks for that. And Amanda, then Councillor Aaron as a Cabinet Member.
Thank you very much, Chair. So obviously the value of the track programme, as already recognised by those of you that have spoken, but also the detail. There's detail about that in the report and also in the attached business case, and also in a further appendix which talks about some of the outcomes, etc. So in that context, I'll focus perhaps just on the budget process side of it for members. So I guess I just wanted to flag that history really around why we're now facing and considering this exceptional business case in year. Obviously, as officers and portfolio holders, members that were aware of track funding, the funding that we were using for track, which was the shared prosperity funding, that was coming to an end at the end of March, and we were obviously aware of that through the budget process. But a couple of things happened around the year end. One, there was an extension to the timescales for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund to the 30th of September, and also we were aware of the new Local Growth Fund, which was essentially the replacement, for want of a better word, of Shared Prosperity. And at those stages around the year end, there was a lack of clarity, both by UK government and through Welsh government, of the exact terms and conditions of the LGF fund. But from all of the discussions that we had been partaking in, both at an officer and at a political level, we were confident that track would continue to qualify for that local growth fund, and therefore we didn't include it as a pressure in the budget for that very reason, because we were confident that funding would be forthcoming. However, unfortunately, as we got into the early part of this financial year and the detailed guidance came out in relation to LGF, it became clear actually that the LGF funding would only support post-16 skills and employability, and therefore the track scheme, which obviously works with pre-16, very valuable work does with pre-16, was no longer eligible, and therefore we felt that it was therefore important to bring this in-year business case on an exceptional basis. But given that it is on an exceptional basis, in order to sort of, as it were, as best fit in as we can with our existing processes, that's why the proposal is to only consider for the minute the 26-27 implication of the 163,000 as a one-off exceptional thing in year, and then to the extent that there is demand or request for further funding from 27-28, if alternative external funding or external proposals can't be identified, then it can come back and fit back within our normal business planning framework for 27-28 onwards. So, as I say, at this point then, because, as you know, there are no unallocated funds within the budget, the support, if supported, the business case would be funded by general balances in the current year, and that's for 163,000. So I hope that just sort of explains the reason why it's coming to you as an in-year exceptional business case, and I guess I want to stress the importance of that, because clearly we have otherwise a business planning framework which considers all of our business cases relatively against each other in accordance with priorities, and allows members to decide on those, when you're considering all priorities alongside each other. And in that context, it isn't a marker, as it were, for a flurry of new in-year business cases to become the norm. We will continue with our existing business planning processes. But as I said, I just wanted to explain the reason why it was here. It wasn't a lack of thought. It wasn't a lack of planning. It was a considered judgment, which turned out not to be the case. And that's why it's in front of you today. Happy to take any questions, and obviously if you want any detail about the detail of the successes of track, then I'm sure again there are other colleagues that can answer that better than I can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amanda. I'll now hand over to my Vice Chair, Councillor Chris Hughes, and I think we've got Councillor Aaron's Cabinet Member queuing. So diolch, members.
Thank you, Cheryl. Diolch. So the next speaker we have is Councillor Aaron Wynne, Cabinet Member.
Thank you, Councillor Chris, and good morning, everyone. As I just want to add quickly, if I can, if I may, I am, of course, very supportive to continue with the track programme, and I know the substantial difference the programme has made in terms of the educational experience of children and young people across the county. The programme offers support, early support and practical support, which is tailored for the needs, individual needs of young people. So helping them to stay in education, improve their well-being, and develop support and confidence in themselves. Track work can deal with the challenges before they increase, and also reduce the risk that children don't want to take part in education. And track, of course, also plays an important part when helping young people to move successfully to further education, to training, or to employment, which is relevant to them and appropriate to them as individuals. I think one of the strengths of the track programme is the strong relationships that have already been established between schools and families, and the real impact it has today on young people. I'm disappointed, as you are, I'm sure, in the room. I'm disappointed that the local leadership can't enable us to use this funding because of the focus on post-16, although track has proved their value. So I will be supporting this today to give it a bit more time for education to find sustainable ways to make sure that we will be able to continue with this programme in the future. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aaron. Our next speaker is Councillor Nia Owen.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me okay? Yes, I also just want to agree with what Councillor Aaron has already said. I've worked with track officers during my career as a secondary teacher, and the work that they do with young people who are facing the challenges listed in the report is invaluable. From my experience, the track officers have got a different relationship and a very special relationship with the learners compared to teachers, because obviously they're not teachers and they're not really linked as or known as school staff. Also, they draw lots of pressure from the school staff, such as head of years, which enable them then to focus on other aspects of their roles in the work. So I'm 100% behind this, and I recommend that we go with this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nia. Cynghorydd Gareth.
Thank you. I'd just like to start to say I don't need any convincing about the benefits of this spend when it comes down to it. The evidence that's been put together in the pack is pretty clear, and from what people have said today, there's definitely benefits for the schools and the pupils. My concern is just in the timing. In the academic year, is there a danger that if we decided not to pass this as a business case, to actually withdraw this part way through the academic year is being completely unfair on parents and children? And also we have to consider the individuals who are delivering this service as well, because my guess is that the majority of that money is actually salaries and people's jobs. So, you know, it kind of makes sense to me that if we're doing it, we should be doing it for an academic year, which doesn't actually fall into our financial years. And if we don't find the money from grants and things, you know, should we look at actually incorporating it within the overall education budget? And as far as redundancies are concerned, again, you know, do we know the costs of those redundancies? Do they increase if we extend this scheme by another 6 months? And when would we start that redundancy process? Because it is a process. And my guess is if we just extend it for 6 months, possibly the people delivering this will be looking for other opportunities and other jobs because of that uncertainty. So, you know, I suppose what I'm saying is we probably need a longer term plan or a clearer idea as to what the plan is, rather than let's do it for 6 months and hope we find some grant funding, because I don't think we can end it in March if we're being fair to pupils and parents.
I'm happy to come in on that, Chair.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, so obviously having held portfolio for many years, I understand the importance of track. And in terms of funding, I know that the department are working to look at alternatives, but in the meantime, I'm going to put pressure on, and I know that Aaron is, and I know that officers are, on Welsh Government to look to fund this programme. I mean, we cannot underestimate the added value, especially in the current climate where attendance is a real priority. I just wanted to read a quote from the young person, which I'm sure most of you have read, but I just think this tells you what track is, and this is replicated across all of our schools. So this young person has said, it has helped me with my mental health because before it, I didn't want to come to school and I was always scared at the thought of going to school. Knowing that track is here every day to support me, it helps me so much. It helps me with my attendance, my schoolwork, and it helps them with their happiness. Having Sam, who's obviously their track worker, has encouraged me to come to school when I was at a low place. If Sam wasn't my track worker and helping and supporting me through the school years, I wouldn't have come back to school at all. I don't walk out of lessons anymore. And when I started on track, my behaviour was really bad. But today I've exited track because I have improved so much. And that's what track adds. And I know you said, Gareth, obviously, you're supportive of this, and I'm sure that everyone is, but I think it's important to understand when we make these decisions, these are the individuals that this is helping. And yeah, it's incredible. So I will do everything I can. I know Aaron is going to do the same to put pressure on the government to fund this. It's crazy, you know, as Aaron said, the fact that the local growth fund has changed so that it only works with post-16. Well, you're kind of setting yourself up to fail there. It's almost like you want them to become neat to then look after them after they're 16. We need to have the early intervention. We hear this all the time, and that's what this funding does. It stops young people and sets them up for the journey post-education. So, I will be doing everything I can. I know that education, I've spoken to Lodi about this and to Jenny, that we will be looking at all options, but I think where we are currently, hopefully there will be funding that will be forthcoming. I know Welsh Government have touched on it. So we'll put pressure. But yeah, I appreciate what you're saying in terms of this ends in April. But the education funding has always run this way. So I think we need to look at the opportunities first and then perhaps revisit if there isn't an alternative found. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that explanation, Julie. I think the point I was making is that if we vote, and I'll be voting for this, if we vote for this, if we don't find the funding, we're almost under an obligation that we need to fund it next year, at least until the end of the academic year, to be fair to the children and the parents. Thank you.
I think this has been such an important part of our educational provision over many years. I remember many years ago I chaired the education committee when we were introducing this, and you can see the benefits of it. It's continued for many years, and I hope it continues for many more years. Do we have any more speakers? Nope. I need a seconder for the recommendations which were moved by Councillor Nia. Sorry. Councillor Cathy. Thank you. Right. So if there are no more questions, we
can I just ask a question of the monitoring officer? Number of young people have benefited coming to the riding school on this track scheme. Do I need to declare an interest? I don't actually own the riding school. I just have the facility on my land, and do I need to declare an interest?
And apologies, Chair. Could you just explain to me again?
We have a riding school based on the farm, run by a volunteer group, and a number of young people have been to my facility with the track scheme and benefited. So do I need to declare an interest, seeing it is happening on my farm?
I think we can. Is that just a small part, I presume, of a much wider scheme? I think we can note that as a personal interest, Councillor Gronwith.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gronwith. Right, we'll move to the vote then. Okay, thank you, and that's carried. Thank you. Yep, and that's the end of the meeting. So thank you, everybody, and I hope those of you that are going on holiday over the next few weeks have a great time. Thank you. Bye-bye.